So, when you are faced with the unknown, what is your default mode in life? I mean, is your very first instinct to retreat and protect yourself, or do you reach out and explore?
That is the big question, right? And usually we think of that as just a personality quirk.
Right, but what if it's way more than that? Like, dark energy is currently ripping the universe apart at a rate of roughly 73 kilometers per second per megaparsec.
Which is a genuinely terrifying number.
It really is. It's this unfathomable, relentless outward expansion. And meanwhile, the gravity of every single star, every planet, every speck of dust is frantically trying to pull it all back inward, to just crush it
In
down.
this massive cosmic tug of war.
Exactly. Now, what if I told you that exact same cosmic war, that literal mathematical tension between infinite expansion and crushing contraction is happening inside your brain right now?
I mean, it sounds like a metaphor you'd find in a sci-fi novel. But the sources we are looking at today argue that it is a literal structural reality of human existence.
And that is the wild starting point for today's deep dive. We have a stack of materials here that are, frankly, just mind-bending.
They really are.
We're looking at these dense, handwritten notes, conceptual diagrams, and some digital art that outline a sweeping philosophy, and they refer to it as the 70-30 principle.
You'll also see it called the Trisept GravEon in the texts, which is associated with the initials MGM.
Right. And the ambition of these documents, it cannot be overstated.
Oh, absolutely not. They take the absolute foundational physics of the cosmos
Yeah.
and use them to explain, like, the split-second decisions you make every single day.
Okay, let's unpack this because the end game these sources are pointing you toward isn't just a fun physics lesson.
No, it's highly practical.
Yeah, the absolute core promise, which is written explicitly at the bottom of the foundational notes, is summed up in 3 words: power, freedom, transcendence.
Which is quite the promise.
Right. They are presenting this as a functional operating manual for the human experience.
But to get anywhere near that transcendence, the author insists we have to completely dismantle how we view our baseline instincts.
Like, completely tear it down.
Exactly. We have to strip away the psychology and look at the actual mechanics of how we behave when faced with the unknown.
Right. Which means before we get to the heavy cosmic math of this 70-30 principle, we need to look at the first visual source.
The hide-and-seek diagram.
Yeah. It illustrates this foundational duality in our behavioral. It breaks our instincts down into 2 stark categories: hide and seek.
And visually, the contrast is aggressive.
It really is. So on the left, you have hide, and it's depicted as this dark, heavy, cracked stone.
Almost oppressive.
Very oppressive. And there are these rigid arrows pointing sharply inward, converging on a dense, dark central circle.
And the text defines this instinct as being driven by pain and self-preservation.
Right, which immediately makes me think of biology. You know, like you tap the glass of a terrarium and a turtle violently snaps back into its shell.
Yeah, that instantaneous reaction.
Yeah. It's a full-body contraction to protect a soft center from a hostile world.
And then the aesthetic entirely flips on the right side of the image.
It's like night and day.
Totally.
Right.
For seek, you have these bright, luminous, golden waves radiating outward from a glowing core.
And the text categorizes this as being driven by pleasure and exploration. Hold on, though. The hide side is literally depicted as cracked, oppressive stone.
Yeah.
And it's explicitly associated with pain. That feels like a massive value judgment to me. Like, is the author implying that self-preservation, which, keeps us alive, is inherently a negative or bad thing?
Well, I read it differently. What's fascinating here is that if we look at another visual source provided in the stack, we get a much clearer picture of the author's intent.
The circle diagram.
Exactly. There's an abstract circular diagram that actually connects both of these textures.
Mm.
The dark, heavy stone of hide and the luminous golden waves of seek form a complete, unbroken ring.
Okay, so the stone section makes up a smaller part of the circle with the arrows pointing in, and the glowing part makes up the rest, flowing out.
Exactly. And the unbroken nature of the ring is the key here. It removes the moral judgment entirely.
So it's not good versus evil.
No, not at all. It is a blueprint of structural integrity. Any functioning system requires both forces. You need contraction, those inward arrows, to maintain a solid core. You need a boundary to survive.
Right.
But you also need expansion, the outward flow, to actually live, gather resources, and grow. A system that endlessly explodes outward dissipates into nothing.
It just vaporizes.
Right. And a system that endlessly collapses inward crushes itself.
Okay, balancing the turtle shell biologically makes perfect sense. You need the shell to survive the tap on the glass, but if you never come out to eat, you starve in the dark.
Precisely.
But balancing a biological instinct still doesn't explain the underlying math. Like, why 70-30? Because the handwritten notes take a massive, almost jarring leap here.
They do. They completely abandon the realm of psychology and pivot directly into astrophysics.
Yes, and this is the transition I'm really struggling to wrap my head around. The notes map these two human instincts directly onto the foundational forces of the universe.
Applying a highly specific mathematical breakdown.
This 70-30 principle. According to the text, contraction makes up roughly 30% of the universe. And they equate the human height instinct directly to gravity and matter.
And specifically, they break it down as 5% regular matter, the stuff we interact with, and 25% dark matter.
Which leaves the expansion side, the seek instinct.
Right, which the notes equate to dark energy. Astrophysicists currently estimate that dark energy makes up roughly 70% of the universe.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, where I need you to help me bridge the gap.
Okay, let's do it.
The author doesn't just draw a poetic parallel here, they literally group these concepts together. Right next to the physical laws of gravity and dark matter, they have written down body, mind, subconscious, and the shadow self.
It is an incredibly bold synthesis, for sure.
But wait, gravity physically pulls mass. Emotional trauma and the subconscious aren't physical mass. How does the author bridge that gap without this just falling apart as a cheap, motivational metaphor?
You have to look at the mechanism of action rather than the material. Think about how gravity actually works in Einsteinian physics.
It bends and warps space-time.
Exactly. A massive object creates a curve, and other objects naturally fall toward it. Gravity dictates the structural paths of everything in its vicinity. It compresses and restricts trajectories.
Okay, so it creates a literal groove that things get stuck in.
Yeah. Now, apply that exact mechanical behavior to human psychology. What does a deep-seated fear or unresolved trauma do?
It warps your behavioral path.
Right. It warps your cognitive space-time.
Yeah.
When you are carrying around the weight of your shadow self, it bends your behavioral paths inward.
Wow.
You might think you're moving forward in a straight line, but that subconscious gravity naturally pulls your decisions toward self-protection, toward risk aversion. It forces a contraction of your possibilities. It forces you to hide.
Man, that makes an uncomfortable amount of sense. When you are operating from a place of deep fear, your world quite literally shrinks.
It does.
Your options contract. You are generating psychological gravity.
And then look at the inverse. What is dark energy doing in the cosmos?
Pushing outward.
It is a property of space itself that relentlessly pushes outward, driving an accelerating expansion of the universe. It defies the gravitational pull.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So the author argues that the seek instinct, that drive for novel experience, for pleasure, for connection, is the internal manifestation of dark energy.
It pushes past the structural limits that your psychological gravity tries to impose.
Exactly. It is the force that accelerates the expansion of the self.
So if our internal universe operates on these cosmic laws, 70% dark energy pushing out, 30% gravity pulling in, how are the actual functional parts of us distributed within that system?
That is the next logical step.
Because where do our faculties sit? This brings us to a diagram labeled the hierarchy of being. And I have to say, it severely messes with how we traditionally value human intelligence.
Oh, it is a radical demotion of the intellect. Let's break down the visual.
So we see that heavy, cracked stone again, representing the 30% contraction side. It is depicted as massive blocks being pressed forcefully downward by arrows labeled gravity and matter.
Right.
One of those stone blocks is labeled body, which tracks perfectly. Our physical bodies are tangible matter. They are subject to physical gravity and biological decay.
Yes.
But the block chained right next to it, equally bound by stone and gravity, is labeled mind.
And while that's happening, rising out of those grounded blocks is the 70% expansion side.
The glowing part.
Right. Depicted as luminous, glowing energy bursting upward, and it is labeled spirit.
And there's a caption pointing to the setup that reads, let me quote it here. The body and mind are bound by structural limits and gravity, the 30%. The spirit acts as the internal manifestation of dark energy, seeking boundless expansion, the 70%.
It's very explicit.
It really is, and I'm really stuck on the mind being trapped in the stone. I mean, we are taught to view the human mind as this vast, boundless space of imagination and limitless potential.
Sure, that's the romantic view.
Right. So why do these sources explicitly bind the mind with structural limits and gravity?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of evolutionary biology,
Mm.
it actually makes perfect structural sense. Think about it. What is the primary baseline function of the human brain?
To keep the organism alive long enough to reproduce.
Right. The mind is, at its core, a highly advanced threat assessment calculator.
Oh, interesting.
It catalogs past pain to predict and prevent future pain. It measures boundaries, applies strict logic, and runs cause and effect simulations. Its entire job is to calculate the gravity of any given situation.
Wow.
Therefore, the mind is inextricably tethered to the material world. It can only operate on the rules of the 30%.
Oh, man. I was actually experiencing this literally yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I spent almost 45 minutes agonizing over a 2-sentence email to a client.
I've been there.
Just staring at my screen, sweating over whether an exclamation point made me look desperate, or if a period made me look passive-aggressive. I was gaming out every possible negative interpretation.
Doing the threat assessment.
Exactly. And by the time I hit send, I was exhausted. My mind wasn't expanding my horizons at all. It was creating a massive gravity well.
That is the perfect illustration. Your mind was just doing its job, treating social friction like a physical cliff you might fall off.
Yeah.
The mind says if you step outside the shell, if you use the wrong punctuation, you might get hurt.
Right.
It is fundamentally conservative because it is bound by earthly structural logic. True boundless exploration, the kind that defies risk purely for the sake of discovery, cannot mathematically originate from a calculator designed to minimize risk.
Okay, so the mind isn't bad per se, it's just heavy. It's practical. It physically cannot be the engine of expansion because its entire mechanism is designed to manage the contraction.
Think of it mechanically. The spirit is the engine, generating the forward thrust. The mind and body are the chassis, the steering, and the brakes.
You absolutely need both to navigate the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A car with just an engine and no chassis just explodes in place.
Right.
But you run into serious trouble if you try to use your brakes to generate forward momentum.
Which brings us to the operational part of this deep dive.
Mhm.
We've diagnosed the internal machinery. We know the body and mind represent the 30% contraction,
Right?
and the spirit represents the 70% dark energy expansion.
Yes.
So how do you actually drive this thing to achieve power, freedom, transcendence? The author provides a very specific order of operations in the handwritten note.
There are 2 directive rules written at the bottom of the page that outline the methodology.
The first rule is spirit first, mind after, body later, in that order.
Which is fascinating.
So what does this all mean for you listening on a Tuesday morning? To me, translating this cosmic framework into a daily habit, this is a literal instruction manual for decision-making.
It really is.
If your spirit is the only faculty capable of that 70% boundless expansion, you have to let it set the destination before you turn the calculator on.
Because if you ask the calculator first, it will instantly tell you why the trip is impossible.
Exactly. If you get a wild idea to change careers or move to a new city, and your very first instinct is to ask your mind if it's a good idea, the mind will immediately look at the gravity of the situation.
They're going to crunch the numbers.
Right. It will calculate the financial risk, the social disruption, the structural limits, and it will forcefully tell you to hide.
Stay in the shell.
Yeah. So spirit first means you decide what you want based on pure exploration and pleasure. You let the dark energy expand. Then, mind after means you hand that bold, already established goal over to the calculator.
To figure out the logistics of how to actually survive the journey.
Exactly.
You are assigning the faculties their correct jobs. The spirit points at the horizon. The mind builds the bridge to get there. The body physically crosses it.
Which flows directly into the second operational rule from the notes. Seek now, so you can consciously hide later.
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's the crux of the entire philosophy.
Okay.
What is the fundamental difference between the reactive hiding we saw in the very first image, driven by pain and fear, and the conscious hiding the author is prescribing here?
Well, I mean, reactive hiding is the turtle snapping shut because something hit the glass. It's a panic response. But conscious hiding, that phrasing, implies strategy.
Let's use a mechanical metaphor. Think of a submarine caught in a massive surface storm.
Okay.
If the submarine is taking on water because the hull is breached and it's sinking toward the ocean floor, that is reactive hiding. It is a catastrophic failure driven by hostile outside forces.
Right.
But if the captain assesses the storm, seals the hatches, and deliberately floods the ballast tanks to dive beneath the turbulence into the calm waters below that is conscious hiding.
Ah, so it's a calculated structural choice to seek safety.
Precisely. Look at the sequence the author demands. Seek now so you can consciously hide later. If you are leading with the spirit, if you are out in the world expending your internal dark energy, taking risks, exploring, pushing your boundaries, you're going to expend that energy.
Because the universe is 70-30, not 100-0. You literally cannot expand forever without collapsing the system.
Gravity eventually claims it's 30%. The contraction must happen. You need to rest to integrate what you've learned to recover.
That makes total sense.
But if you have genuinely sought outward first, when the time comes to contract, it is a deliberate restorative choice. You are flooding the ballast tanks to find calm.
Wow.
You are retreating to a place of safety that you built, not running away from a world that terrified you.
So reactive hiding is a reflex born of trauma. You are a victim of your own gravity. But conscious hiding is a restorative choice born of satisfied exhaustion. You are just docking the ship so you can go back out and seek again tomorrow. That is an incredibly potent way to reframe resting. You aren't failing, you are fulfilling the 30% structural requirement of the universe.
And that continuous cycle, expanding fearlessly with the spirit, then consciously resting the mind and body without guilt or fear, that rhythm is what the author defines as power, freedom, transcendence.
We have covered some massive conceptual ground today, so let's quickly retrace the path.
Get an idea?
We started with the primal split-second instinct of the human animal, the urge to hide from pain versus the urge to seek pleasure.
We then explored how these handwritten notes map those mundane psychological behaviors directly onto the architecture of the cosmos, aligning our heavy, fear-driven traumas with the physical pull of gravity and matter.
Right, and we learned that our practical mind and our physical body are the gravity. They're the necessary 30% structural limits that keep the machine from flying apart. But our spirit, that luminous rising energy, is our internal manifestation of dark energy, responsible for our 70% outward expansion.
And we finalized the blueprint with the order of operations. Let the spirit dictate the direction, and only then let the mind calculate the path. Expand outward deliberately, so your inevitable need for rest is a conscious choice of recovery, rather than a panicked retreat.
Which leaves us with a fascinating, entirely new implication to consider.
What's that?
Well, we've been talking about this 70-30 principle on an individual level, but if the spirit's 70% expansion is the literal engine of human progress, what happens when we apply this to humanity as a whole?
Oh, wow. On a macro level.
Yeah. We are rapidly approaching an era where we become a multiplanetary species. We are physically enacting dark energy on a macro level, pushing past the stratosphere, looking to colonize Mars and beyond.
It is the ultimate expression of seek.
But the universe demands its 30% contraction. So as we physically expand our presence across the cold, terrifying void of space, what happens to our collective hide instinct?
That's a great question.
Does the vast distance stretch our collective psychological gravity until it snaps, freeing us entirely? Or will we find ourselves forced to build an even heavier, denser, more restrictive collective mind just to manage the terrifying risks of the cosmos? As we push further into the dark, are we leaving our gravity behind or just dragging it into orbit with us?
That is heavy.
It's definitely something to chew on the next time you look up at the night sky. But for now, don't let your internal gravity dictate your destination. Let your spirit take the lead, give the threat assessing calculator a day off, and go out and see it. Seek today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.